So the characteristic of the vegetation in Malaysia is dense evergreen rainforest, and rainforest in Malaysia still covers more than 2/5 of the peninsula of some 2/3 of Sarawak and Sabah, and another fraction of the country is under swamp forest. And the Malaysian rainforest is among the richest of the world. So in the survey shows that there are 8,000 species of flowering plants, which include of 2,000 species of trees, 100 types of orchids, and 200 types of palm, besides being home to more than 200 species of mammals, 600 different bird varieties, 140 species of snakes, 80 types of lizards, and around 300 species of freshwater fishes, and of course thousands of insects making their home in the rainforest. So for example, a really well-known plant that can only be found in Southeast Asia is the rafflesia, and to be specific, it occurs only in the rainforest of Sumatra and Borneo. However, through times, the biodiversity in Malaysia has decreased due to several reasons, such as pollution, animal poaching, illegal hunting, and also deforestation. And we have to know that each and every life form has its own role to play when it comes to keep our world spinning the way it has for a very long time, and the loss of a single species can actually alter the biodiversity of the eco-landscape of its inhabitants. For example, losing a herbivore, it can cause in the lower of number in plant seed dispersal and more frequent and intense wildfire and habitat changes for smaller animals such as fishes, birds, and frogs. Also, not forgetting a lack of food source for carnivores, which then will extend their hunting ranges further and closer towards villagers, and we do not want this to happen. So, to go more in depth about this topic, in this video you will see the several species of flora and fauna that already classified as endangered species, and the conservation process and the management that we have in order to protect them.
A loss of habitat can happen naturally. Dinosaurs, for instance, lost their habitat about 65 million years ago. Human activity can also contribute to a loss of habitat. Development for housing, industry, and agriculture reduces the habitat of native organisms. Development can eliminate habitat and native species directly. Development can also endanger species indirectly. Some species, such as fig trees of the rainforest, may provide habitat for other species. Species become endangered for two main reasons, which the loss of habitat and the loss of genetic variation. Genetic variation is the diversity found within a species. That's why human beings may have blonde, red, brown, or black hair. Genetic variation allows species to adapt to changes in the environment. Usually, the greater the population of a species, the greater its genetic variation. Inbreeding is reproduction with close family members. Group of species that have a tendency to inbreed usually have little genetic variation because no new genetic information is introduced to the group. Monoculture, the agricultural method of growing a single crop, can also reduce genetic variation. Modern agribusiness relies on monocultures. Threatened and endangered animal species. They are known as charismatic megafauna for a reason. These endangered animals own star power, a factor that conservationists have capitalized on in order to fund projects to protect them. Firstly, the giant panda. In China, which is home to the remaining wild population of fewer than 2,500 individuals, has in the late 1980s instituted more stringent habitat protections and poaching has all but ceased. Secondly, tiger. Slash and burn agriculture along with logging and human encroachment have hugely diminished the habitat available to these felines, which require extensive ranges capable of supporting the large herbivores that constitute the bulk of their diets. The whooping crane. In 1938, the first year a population survey was conducted, only 29 whooping cranes remained in the wild. 3 years later, only 16 were left. Hunting and reducting of their wetland habitat had vitiated the population, and concerted efforts to salvage remnant birds did not begin until the late 1960s. Next, the blue whale. There are fewer than 25,000 blue whales, the largest animals on the planet. Comprising several subspecies, blue whales are found in all of the world's oceans save the Arctic. The current population is thought to have been reduced by up to 90% by whaling in the 20th century. Fifth, the Asian elephant. That number may be far lower in some regions inhabited by the lumbering basidiums are inaccessible due to the terrain or to political volatility, and while the tusks of Asian elephants are much smaller than those of their African counterparts, the Asian species is still poached for its ivory, meat and skin.
There are many plants that have been classified under threatened and endangered species due to the anthropogenic factor. The first plant species is the Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap is a flowering plant, but best known for its carnivorous eating habit, but it has listed as vulnerable and endangered species. It is threatened by overcollection, habitat destruction, and also fire suppression. This species is crucial for keeping insects under control so that the nearby plants can grow in a healthy manner. It is a popular potted plant in many parts of the world, but unfortunately, most of the Venus flytrap soil have been cultivated or collected from the declining wild population. The second plant species is the Rafflesia. In addition to having among the world's largest petal blossom, which are around the size of a small chair, it is another flower known for the enormity of its smell, given that it is also referred to as a corpse flower. It can be mistaken for the Titan arum. However, the collectors of this flower are unusually popular, and poaching, collection, poor conservation practices, and habitat damage are hastening its extinction. The third plant species is pine heel, or the scientific name is Cenotes rodericki. This evergreen plant, which can reach a height of 6 feet, is distinguished by its tiny, white flower and glossy green leaf. Due to habitat degradation and livestock grazing, the pine heel has been reduced to only a few hundred plants in a while. The next plant species named Welwitschia mirabilis. This two-leaf shrub is indigenous to the desert of South Africa. As the plant ages, the leaf lengthen and tangle. The oldest known instances are thought to be over 1,000 years old and can grow to cover an area of 6 feet square. The last of these plants are gradually disappearing due to climate change after being damaged as a result of land development. The next one is Spiritus aestivalis. Spiritus aestivalis, commonly known as girl's bread, or a mini orchid that grows throughout the majority of Western Europe and North Africa. It is an endangered species plant. It can be found in Spain, but frequently grows to tiny communities that are abandoned and become overrun by weeds. It has thin stem and just the height of a little finger. They are elusive plant, but their growth is more threatened by destructive of their habitat brought by agriculture, desertification and deforestation.
The last species is coffee plant. Global coffee market is growing at a compound annual growth of 5.5% during forecast period of 2019 to 2014. The excessive demand and overexploited put them at risk, while climate change leads to their disappearance. According to a study published in Science Advances, around 60% of wild coffee species are expected to become extinct due to deforestation, human settlement, and climate change.
Next is the conservation process and management. The first thing that we should do to conserve those endangered species is we should design a well-protected area such as a national park, wildlife reserves, or any conservation center. So when we put those species in these protected areas, basically it helps the species to assimilate, to live, to assimilate, to evolve, or to reproduce naturally in their own habitat. We allow these endangered species to live in their native environment. So, for example, in any conservation center, maybe Perkhidmatan could conduct a research, a specific research, or any development program just to ensure that those species could be increased every year. They could conduct a research to protect the endangered species, and maybe they have their own ways on how to increase the population size of that endangered species. For example, a conservation center in Kuala Gandah, they just focus solely on how to conserve a species of an elephant. But it is quite different to Sungai Perak, Sungai Conservation Center in Perak. I've been there before. I had an experience there. They focus on many different kind of species such as seladang, rusa samba, rare species of birds, and even harimau Malaya. So this designating a well-protected areas not only just benefit that particular species at risk, but other species associated with them, thereby it will increase the overall amount of biodiversity conserved. Next is captive breeding. In Malaysia, maybe 50 to 60 years ago, captive breeding was not a very well-known procedure, and people were not very much interested in conservation process and everything. But nowadays, this procedure is very important because we do realize that many species, either animals or plants, are facing extinction. So in this modern era, with technologies developed by scientists and even the biologists played their roles, this initiative should be put into consideration as it has many benefits to that particular endangered species. So basically, the main goals of captive breeding is to establish a population of that animal through controlled breeding that are large enough to be demographically stable and genetically healthy. So captive breeding is very much important because it can protect those endangered species against any extinction. So these objectives ensure that a population will exhibit a healthy age structure, resistance to disease, consistent reproduction, and the preservation of the gene pool to minimize or to avoid problems associated with inbreeding. So captive breeding, for all sorts of reasons, it could enhance the productivity of that particular species, and it will increase the population of that endangered species. Next is laws, treaty, and regulations. In Malaysia, we have a very specific act for the conservation of species, such as Akta Pemeliharaan Hidupan Liar 2010. But for international level, we have two treaties, which are CITES and CMS. CITES stands for Convention of International Trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora. As we all know that illegal trade is happening right now, we could hear that various endangered species or under threat species of animals or plants have been sold or smuggled illegally. So the purpose of CITE is to regulate or ban any international trade in species under threat or endangered species. The purpose of CITE is to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten the survival of the species. It ensures that particular species survival in the wild with benefits for the livelihoods of local people and the global environment. So basically, CITES is an international agreement between governments. Next is CMS. CMS stands for Convention on Migratory Species of Wild Animals. So it aims to conserve terrestrial, marine, or avian migratory species throughout their range. So this convention has considerably potential as a mechanism for the protection of endangered species. So it is an environmental treaty of the United Nations that provides a very wide global platform for the conservation and sustainable use of terrestrial, aquatic, and avian migratory animals in their habitats.
So we have come to an end of this video. So as a conclusion, biodiversity should be conserved as it is a catalyst for national development and itself is our national heritage, as Malaysia is blessed with a mega diversity which is acknowledged worldwide. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope we can work together as a community to save our flora and fauna from being extinct in this world.